or UDOT, actually it's the Transportation Commission as well, the requirements to participate in the TRZ as well. City staff and UDOT have been working for many years on this conversation. In 2020, we began the conversation with UDOT regarding the development of what is about 40.5 acres at the intersection of Gordon and Highway 89. In 2021, we discussed with them the benefits of master planning the property, entitlements. Before they sold the property, they were pretty anxious to sell the property right away, and we were able to talk them into going through this process with us before they did that. And in 2022, the city was awarded a grant from WFRC to master plan the property, which, as you are well aware of, resulted in the Gordon Avenue Highway 89 Town Center Master Plan, which you adopted on March 21st of this past year. 40.5 acres is shown in the property that has the hash marks on it. This is just to outline the process that took place through that planning effort. You can see, and many of you were in the middle of that whole process. It took about a year, a little over a year, to complete that process. There was an open house and a public hearing. I also know there were many conversations with residents between our former planning director and the residents in that area, and as well as our planning manager. And then again, it was adopted on March 21st of this past year. This is the result. In 2023, June 30th, 23 is when UDOT completed the Highway 89 widening project. And in this past fall, UDOT indicated they were ready to have the conversation about the creation of a TRZ. We drafted an interlocal agreement. It went back and forth several times between the city and UDOT and the Attorney General's office. And the final draft was finished on December 10th of this past year. And on December 13th, the Utah Transportation Commission Board authorized UDOT staff to move forward with this agreement, to work with us, implement the agreement, and create the TRZ. So this agreement is a result of these processes, and there are several things that I'd like to highlight. The first is that the legislation allowed us to collect property tax and sales tax for the purpose of funding certain transportation projects. Those projects, which I will discuss right below here. So the TRZ board would approve the projects. So the tax increment, when it's collected, has to be deposited into a separate TRZ fund. It's similar to an RDA and EDA, and then the board approves those projects and the funding for the projects. The way the agreement reads is that funding has to be in place to construct the project before it begins, and then it may be reimbursed by the TRZ fund. And this can be done in any other funding mechanism that either we or UDOT has, but then the reimbursement can take place through the increment that's collected through the TRZ fund. And then this is probably the highlight of this agreement. It indicates that the proposed projects shall comply with all adopted planning documents. So that includes the master plan that we just adopted.
Any questions on that?
We're the only party,
Correct.
So that's a new job.
so no sharing with the school district and the, like in the RDA or DDA or.
Right.
It's just the taxes collected from this
Just that area.
45 acres or whatever.
Well, it's about 52 acres for that whole area that was shown in orange, and it'll be whatever. And some of that's just right of way on the highway, so it's not.
It mentioned two specific projects, the underpass, that's under Gordon, right? Is that already built though, when they built that?
No.
Okay.
The amount of money that will be generated off this is fairly small compared to the city's view, and UDOT supported it, is that the real value of the TRZ is not just in capturing the economics, but it's the ability to have 40, 50 acres that has been master planned and you can predict how it's going to develop. And that's why we went through the process with that plan that I just explained that you guys were a big part of. Is the intention is to, UDOT's commitment has been, verbally, is to sell that as one piece of property with those entitlements in place. And so that's the next step, is to work to get those entitlements in place from the city. That's part of the value of the partnership, if you will. And so a developer who buys that knows what they're buying. They don't have the ability to come in and break it up and do this and that. And so the economics should be a little bit, light on it over time, but we think that the value is in getting something that's really well done. You just don't have, practically hardly ever have those kind of opportunities on this size of a property to control that. With regard to the funding, one can feel that we had back and forth with UDOT about this, and they've been supportive of it, is that, again, the way the increment will come in on this, because it's fairly small compared to the cost of these projects, is if it's based on the board, there'll be a representative from the city, a representative from UDOT, and a third representative being appointed as well. Is the projects will be brought to them, and it could be a state-initiated project or it could be a city-initiated. So the underpass, for example, was talked about, would be a city-initiated project. There's a couple of semaphores that are eventually going to have to go in when demand requires, that would be they're on the state system, and so that they would benefit the area. And so the view is that, at least in the discussions, is that if it's a city-initiated project that we're asking for, and the board supports that as being, let's say, number one, then the city would be required to demonstrate that there's funding in place to capture it. So you may, I'm just making these numbers up, but it may be a $5 million project, and the increment has only generated $3 million to this point. Well, the city would commit to provide those additional funds to get that in, but then they would be able to be reimbursed on the back end. Otherwise, you couldn't have any projects done for quite a while. You have to wait 15 years to build something. But we wanted to make sure that both from our end and from UDOT's end, that nobody started a project and then you couldn't finish funding it. That you have to go to your governing body. So I was telling the mayor earlier that these projects are going to flow back through from the board to the staff, back to you guys, because you're going to have to make the funding commitment to say we're going to do this project, and there can't be any risk either from the state side or the city side that it gets halfway through and then somebody says, well, we're not going to commit the rest of the, I was a different council, we're not going to commit the rest of the funding. And so we think this has been a really good relationship with the Region 1 UDOT. They've been real champions helping us navigate and be able to navigate the political issues that are at play, have been at play, still are at play at the state level, and really see value in this, and what can hopefully they and us have tried to look at it as this is the first one in the state, and if we can kind of set a pattern and create a structure that can be replicable, that's good. And they've really worked hard, and we have as well to try to come up with something that can be duplicated.
So how will the funding be generated with the tax increment then? If there's nothing there, it's just dirt, there's no sales tax.
To start it?
Yeah, how does it?
Have to have funding to start.
Or you'll get increment when it starts to develop. It's just like any other increment.
So every year?
Yeah.
Based on the tax year?
So you know what the assessed value is now,
Yeah.
and when the development starts, then those numbers are going to climb, and so it'll take a few years to start hitting it, but we think there's a lot of interest, as you know.
And how would the sales tax part of that work? Is there a percentage, more of a percentage than we normally get for that area, or am I just confused? I get the property tax part of it.
No, I would assume, and I'm not as sharp on that as I probably ought to be, but my assumption would be that once whatever development comes in there, you would look and have the ability to capture what the sales tax is that's being generated
100%.
by those. Yeah,
Oh,
well,
so
100% of our portion.
Yeah, the way I read it is you had to have a separate account set up just for this, so all sales tax that it's generated from that property goes into that account, and then that account then is divided 50/50, right?
Yeah, between this, the state has access to some and we have access to some.
Okay. Interesting.
But the idea is, based on discussion with UDOT, is that, because I know in our discussions, there have been worry from some parties that weren't involved in it initially, at the state, for example, that, well, so you're going to have competing projects, that the state's going to want to use their money to do one thing, and you're going to be trying to do your thing. And what we've talked about is, no, the idea would be through this board structure, is there would be a prioritization set that everybody agrees with. This is the most important, this is second, this is third, etc. And so those dollars, the state and the city aren't going to be competing with each other and withholding dollars. If it's a state project, we want to be supportive of helping this the best priority. We want to help that get put in place, right? And so some of our dollars, at least the staff would recommend, flow to that to support that project and vice versa, right? But
Back to my question, I get the 50/50 with the state and us, but we get a sales tax, we get a portion of it,
yeah,
and then we're at about 1%.
1%, right?
So, and then with the sales tax generated there, I guess what's the difference? We'll generate it. How does that generate? I mean, how does that fund work? I'm confused. Because we're already going to get sales tax from that area anyway. So what's different?
I think from my understanding, I think the difference is kind of what the mayor touched on, is that I think the law, you jump in if I misstate this, is it says that the sales tax that's captured off that doesn't just flow into your regular sales tax distribution. It's pulled out and set aside. And the idea is to be able to fund, that's a source of revenue to fund transportation improvements in that specific area.
So you're just creating an account.
Yeah, essentially that money would be like a special revenue account. That's not the right accounting word accurate, but
Just for that purpose?
it would be set aside for that purpose as opposed to flowing into your general dollars and then putting it back in.
So it's, the money that's generated there is earmarked to be spent in that area, that geographic.
Yeah, that's a better way of saying it.
For transportation.
But it's not any more money than you would?
No.
Pretty limited.
It's no, okay.
No, it's
The
just no-
share's the same with the state, with the county, with everybody else. It's just earmarked for projects,
Yeah.
transportation projects.
Yeah, I assume the state transportation, the tax commission would know that there's been a TRC established and that revenue that's coming off there would be, rather than putting in the general distribution, would be earmarked and would go someplace different.
Okay. Thank you.
What type of projects would UDOT have in that area? It mentioned two, well, I guess that lighted intersection would be UDOT.
Yeah, they've talked about, at least in the discussions I've been involved in, is the potential for certainly one and maybe two eventual semaphores that light, before we lighted intersections that would need to be done when the traffic demand gets there. So there's not a lot of projects, and it matches up pretty well because there's not going to be a lot of money generated over time, and there's not a lot of projects, so we think it's workable. And the state's view, again, is similar to the state employees' view, UDOT's view. Again, it's not about the money. It's about trying to provide UDOT with an opportunity to help be supportive of community building. They're trying to reposition that a little bit and be more sensitive to how transportation and development need to work together, both to benefit the city and also to try to benefit UDOT down the road, so they don't put in transportation improvements, for example, in an important area, and then the development completely blows those improvements up because you allow density or things that were never anticipated, right? They've had that happen before, and then basically they find themselves in fairly short order coming back and having to redo what they spent a lot of money to do. And so, again, at the local level, that's really been the kind of excitement around the model is if we can collectively show that you can build transportation improvements and development in a coordinated, cooperative way, then it has longevity, and you're not going back spending more tax dollars to correct something that you made a guess about what the transportation improvements need to be, and then the development that's taken place overwhelms that, and it fails, kind of a thing. But
Well, and it helps support the overall master plan
yeah,
in different areas.
2018 was in the bill was passed. How come, if it was a good idea in 2018, put into a bill, like, why is this the first one 6 years later? Like, what? Maybe that's rhetorical. That's the question, like,
Well, the rules, actually, the rules for the Transportation Commission and UDOT were not passed until last year.
but the formation of the TRZ, I mean, you said it, the first was 2018.
Things like the administrative rules and stuff that govern how you actually set
So-
it up.
so
They
we
pass
were-
the statute and then they said, oh, we'll do the regulations later.
So nobody was excited about it in 2018 to force what you just mentioned, to force it to, well, how do we actually do this?
Right.
I'm just asking the question, just like,
That was the first
And
step.
at that time,
The
actually,
legislature passes lots of things that are unrealistic, so they just have to fix them.
So alternatively, so in another situation, we just have that piece of land and UDOT sells the property to whomever piece by piece. But in that scenario, we get 100% of the revenue, right? But whereas here we only get half, but we're thinking that it's better to take half on this because we think that the master plan is worth half of the revenue generation. Is that right? Okay.
yeah, in essence, and again, that
But it's for what, 20 years is all? Till 2046, and then after that, 100% would come to the city?
yeah,
So,
yeah, and you're
Yeah.
And we're also not talking about a lot
a
of
lot of
revenue.
right, and it's more or less controlling what the outcome of what your
estimate
place
what,
looks
3
like.
million.
yeah, the estimate in property tax is only about $1 million.
Excuse
and
me?
Sales tax,
Only? Don't use the word only.
well, we were talking
Only to a person.
48
Yes.
million.
Okay.
And sales tax is going to be between 4 to 5 million. It depends on, obviously, the users that locate there. That was based off of existing grocery use that we have and some other property that I tried to figure that out. But it'll be small.
So I guess, in comparison, maybe this will help. Can you give an estimate of the difference between this sales tax revenue and the reimbursement over 20 years compared to like the RC Willie situation in Layton? And maybe the difference between those, like monetarily?
The RC Willie, we anticipate, well, they have a cap of 1.7 million to be reimbursed, and that'll probably be over a 12-year period for them to capture that for their one building. And so that's kind of where the difference, they collect about 150,000 and they pay about 150,000 each year in property tax so far, and we reimburse that amount until we reach each of the caps for the participating taxing entities. But that would be about 12 years, 1.7 million. So this is similar. This includes more than one user, obviously. And it's based on the master plan, so however that ends up, we hope it'll be generally the same.
The hope with the, maybe this is redundant, but the hope with an expectation with sharing some of those revenue streams with the state is that we're going to get the transportation improvements that allow the project to function and do well. So it's not, there's a built-in funding mechanism when that semaphore needs to go in. There's nobody saying we don't have the budget to put that in, and you can do it, which contributes to the success of the area.
Because one of my concerns was, obviously, the state can figure out their own financing, they can find money where they want to find money. It seems like we are restricted from doing that, so my first instinct was like, I don't want to share money with people that we have to generate our own, and they can find it whatever fund they find it out of. But to your point, the improvements that they would make from that fund have to be directed back to the area, the TRZ. So it's really just we're capturing the funds, we're making them stay
Yeah.
here. That makes more sense.
Yeah.
And prioritizing the projects.
And I think we hope at the end of the, sorry, but we hope that just based on our discussions, at least with Rob, like the director, I can't speak for him, but we've had a lot of discussions about this over the years, is that they're very, at the local level, they're very committed to help this be successful. They very much have the view that this is about the community, about Layton. It's not about really UDOT per se, except trying to protect their investments. They're happy to be a partner with us. They've been quite generous. It's been different than sometimes it is in interacting with the state. I'm not saying that's negative, but it's been very, very positive, and they have the vision. So I think the way that hopefully it's structured is once this board is put in place, that really becomes kind of the governing body, and that's really made up of local, if you will, Region 1 people, and local meaning the city. I don't think we'll anticipate having influence from Salt Lake, if that makes sense, the legislature, et cetera, in this. I think it'll be they have to approve the framework, but hopefully then it's a give and take that exists at a local level. And we do that. We meet with UDOT on these kind of things every other month as a standing meeting for years and years, and work through those. What needs to be done here? How do we do it? How do we cooperate? So that's the expectation is that we both have a vested interest in making this area successful. And again, you just don't have ever hardly in this community an opportunity where you have that kind of massive land that is under single ownership and is committed to be a partner with you to allow the city to work with them to place the entitlements on there, and then it's just a really rare thing, especially for that scale. We've had, I'm talking too much, but we've had some commercial brokers over the years that have inquired about that. When we talked to them about what we were trying to do there, even in the early days, they were amazed, one, that kind of opportunity would exist, and were very high in their praise of what if you guys can, with the state can pull that off for the development side, that could be a remarkable place. One of them has said repeatedly when he comes through that this will be one of the prime sites in
That was my question.
Utah.
Because it's new, and so I wouldn't want to discourage development by saying we're not getting involved, that's brand new, we'll go do something else. But could it potentially be a situation where you could get a pretty elite, or I guess high level entity come in there and want to be a part of it because they know it's going to be master planned in a way that maybe they wouldn't want to come into a place that's got 12 different parcels and they're going to be on one and then they have no idea what's going on in the other?
Yeah, that's the hope.
That's the key to
That's been the
yeah.
vision, is that a large developer that would have experience in the area, there'd be a lot of interest in the property, and that's why they're keeping it together. There have been efforts through the process, let's leave it at that, efforts to break the property up, peel off pieces here and there, and UDOT, to their credit, has we've spent a lot of elbow grease on them at the same time, but to not do that, because it's such a rare thing, but we think there's safeguards and guardrails in place, and so the development, we have some local developers that are extremely interested in this, and we expect that there will be some, maybe even some outside developers across the state, maybe even regionally, that will see an opportunity to develop it under a master plan, and so that's the hope. There's still a lot of work to be done, and you guys will be involved in that and the process, but it's really important to get this in place to stop some of the overtures that are being made politically to get fingers in the pie, if you will, and to have the Transportation Commission adopt it was big, and then by statute we had to do the public hearing, and then that locks that kind of down, and then we'll continue to work. So I apologize for talking
You're all right.
touching the other comment.
So I'm a proponent of elected officials choosing how tax dollars are spent. This board, the makeup is only 3. A representative of the city, I think it said, that's familiar with construction or development. I feel better that it's tied to this area and specifically transportation, but is there any oversight, whether from this council or the UTA board, how decisions are made of what projects are approved from that board? Because that board's only 3 people.
Yeah. That's a good question. We talked about that. What we would envision, and the bylaws, the structure of how that board will function needs to be written. Wasn't dictated in state statute. As I recall, the agreement just talks about that'll have to be done as part of the follow-up process. But as explained to the mayor, at least in our discussions, the way we've anticipated it would probably, I would recommend that our representative, because it needs to be, our view is, it's not a political appointment, it's an operational appointment. You're looking at transportation improvements. That's what we're really talking about. So, for example, I think our public works director would be the best one that's who we rely on to do city projects. And the state may do the same thing. But the funding, when those projects are talked about among that board, either before they sort of talk about them as part of some kind of a planning, visioning process on us, we would identify with you, we collectively would identify, we think these are the projects that would be important, i.e. an underpass, there needs to be that. That's an important thing for the city to do. That would be, they wouldn't come up with those in a vacuum, they would come up with those based on discussions internally with the city or with their elected officials. And I think the state would probably do the same thing. Then I think what they would do is come back and say, okay, we've identified 4 projects that make sense here. These are the priorities that we think, strictly from a operational perspective. This is 1, this is 2, this is 3, this is 4. I think those should come back, then back through the staff. And Layton City, as you see in there, is the one that will provide the staffing to the board. Mm-hmm. So we're going to be heavily involved in it. Just come back and say, okay, council, these are the 4 projects that have jointly been identified by UDOT and us. These are the prioritizations. What do you think? Do you have any concerns about that? And you may say, no, that sounds great. Or you may say, well, we're getting a lot of questions about this interchange or the semaphores. We think it's better in response to, I'm just making things up, to the public, to say let's get that intersection in, and then let's make the underpass second, for example. So eventually it's going to come back through you guys, and you have to provide the funding. And if it's not according to your desires, they have no ability to fund it on their own.
When you say the funding, you're talking
project,
like whatever hasn't been collected already,
yeah,
whatever to complete the project.
Yeah. And the way the increment's going to be generated over time, and the dollar amounts, I think that's going to be the reality is that whatever the city or the state that wants to fund it, it's going to have to commit some funds up front that are over and above what has been generated today, because it's just not going to generate that much money. So that's definitely, you'll have the say on it.
So the money, so like the ramp commission, how that works, where you have the commissioners, they go through all the projects, they put a priority together, they present it to us, and we okay it to be funded. This is kind of like this, or
I think it's kind of like
Tyson's
that.
point, because if we don't, maybe we don't
Rep
want
is an advisory board.
Uh-huh.
And,
maybe we don't want to do. I don't know. Maybe something happens that we don't. This board says no, we want to do this, and we have information, or that no, we don't want to do that.
Yeah, I think that I would be surprised. I think you'll, because
Or if the state
Who's the
doesn't
third
want.
member? Just one that we agree with.
The
One that
financial advisor? Or-
both parties agree to.
Yeah.
Who writes the check
I guess
for the
that's-
money that's generated? Who writes the check? It says, yep, here's the money for the project for that area.
Does Layton City facilitate the TRZ account, the fund account?
We hold the account, we'll administer the account, manage the account. The board would be the one that approves expending the money.
Well, not us.
Well, if you build the project first, then it would be Layton City that approves the funding for the project. If you wait 20 years, because that's probably how long it'll take to generate the increment, then the board could.
Because they have the money.
Well, yeah, but and the city's gonna be this, the administration, I think, of this is gonna be done by the city. UDOT's not gonna, if they end up doing these across the state, UDOT's not gonna get involved in
Yeah.
managing all the TRZs. The city's responsibility to manage it, so I imagine we'll have to set up separate accounts, and we'll track it, we'll be the staffing to it. Back to your comparison of the ramp, I think that's somewhat accurate, except that the ramp are appointed or selected, but they don't work for the entities. They're citizens, right? In this case, at least on our side, and I suspect the same on UDOT's side, these are employees who work for, your representatives are employees of the city who are going to be on this. And so I think they'll be pretty well attuned in and they know what the process is in Layton, and I'm sure the UDOT appointees will know what the process is on UDOT. So I don't think you'll have a board that will be trying to step significantly outside of it, even at all, of what their typical priorities are. Does that make sense? I think they won't have a sense of independence that we have some power that we can act and force contrary to what our entities want. I don't think that'll happen. And I think it's one of the beauties, frankly, of not having it be outside people. It's really a small group. It's them. We work all together with Region 1 all the time, and it's just us. It's not somebody in Salt Lake or legislators, with all due respect, talents come in and saying, well, I think this or I think that. These are things we do anyway, but it's a little more structured. And one thing about it, I'm talking too much, but this is the first one, so nobody's ever done this before.
Yeah.
We're just trying to work through these details, and there may be some fits and starts, and our hope is in good faith.
Well,
We can work through those, and if there's an issue, Rob's committed, we'll fix them. And we said the
Yeah.
same thing. If we run into something we missed, we'll work to fix it. But at some point, it has to start, and get all the side chatter kept to the side, and then we can start working through these issues. So that's kind of where we're at now.
The benefit to that is the legislation isn't very thick yet.
Right.
It's
It's not.
pretty flexible.
well, and you have two entities that are trying to accomplish something, so it's a little easier to make it work. And then when you get it, then it has to come before the board or the council because of the money that comes out of the city. And then I would assume we'll know a lot about it before it comes to where we have to say, hey, it won't be like a surprise, I hope.
But
Shouldn't
it's still different than,
But it's different.
with the EDA and the RDA, we have a separate meeting and we're the board.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
we say, yeah, do it, don't do it,
And we
whatever.
still kind of are, because when they come, it's just like ramp, we can say no.
It sounds like these projects are probably going to be big enough that they're going to be in the form of reimbursement, so we put the money for it first.
And we have to
And most of the
okay
funds
that.
are going to be reimbursed over the 20 years, the length of the agreement.
The city project, we would initiate it and make the commitment on the funding. To come heck or high water, if something falls apart, then we're going to finish it, and the UDOT has made the same commitment on their end. So nobody's left holding the bag, or a project halfway done and the state says, well, we're not funding anymore, or we say, we're not funding anymore, that there's that commitment up front. And that's how UDOT does their projects, just like we've tried to do, we have done over 30-some years, is we don't start a project unless we come to the council, and the council said, yeah, we set aside this money, so there's no risk of.
We're not going to run out and call it quits and have something half done.
I think the other thing that gives me, that makes me feel fine about it is the fact that the board, whatever projects, that they're going to put forth are going to basically be, suggested or submitted from the parties they're representing, which in our case is us and our staff, as well as none of those projects can be outside of what we've agreed to in the plan for that area already. So for me, the idea of a board, 3-person or 20-person going rogue is a little off, just because
20-person?
we won't talk about that.
18.
18, sorry,
18.
round.
Does that?
We will mention names,
Apparently it
just
happens.
numbers.
But because we've already put in place this plan for this area, this TRZ is agreeing and basically saying, yes, we're agreeing that this is what the plan is for that space. So I just can't, and you know, maybe I'm just being, you know, faithful and naive, but I can't imagine that this 3-person board would be able to go outside of that with all that's put in place already to prevent those things from happening.
Now, in fact, one thing I forgot to mention is this agreement actually requires a separate agreement for each of the projects that are brought to the board. So that will help solve the
Yeah.
concerns.
Thanks.
Lead with that one.
Yeah.
Should have. I don't know why I left it on.
Well, kind of interrupted his presentation.
Yeah, we did, we jumped in.
He only
He's
got-
used
No,
to
they
it.
asked for it, they paused and said.
Have we covered everything now?
Yeah, I was going to say, how we doing?
I'm sure we
Paused, yeah, jump in.
Yeah, don't ever pause. and
This
do
just
that.
shows
Yeah.
the
Don't breathe.
This clip was ready.
That was the end. So
Okay.
cool.
everything in orange is the area.
Personally, I like it because it gives control and the outcome is going to be consistent and a product that you'll be proud of and looks like it's planned and not hodgepodge. Or you sit there with some parcels that aren't even developed yet, which that's happened to us. So, anyway. Okay,
Okay.
that's it on that one. We good?
Yeah.
You guys good?
So once this is done, what's like next steps? Just because, you know, residents, as well as us, because we're residents, always want to know, when are we getting, you know, fill in the blank? So what are the time frames? What's the next steps?
Zach and a backhoe with this.
I don't think I put Zach.
It's more Tyson speed.
I know, but, you know.
No, Zach's gonna work on the instructions for the board.
White collar
Okay,
here.
all right.
There was a Traco at Blair Mountain, did you see that?
So one of the things which we've talked about,
The senator.
Lauren and I and Chad have talked about this, Trent might have been involved with some of those as well, but essentially, this is a big piece to get this locked down and going forward. What we think is we need to begin the process now of working through the entitlements. The state can't, I'm talking pretty generally here, but the state isn't in the business of asking for entitlements typically, right? They don't typically ask for things to be rezoned on their property. They usually just sell their ground at whatever the underlying zone is that's already exists when they purchase it, which was ag in this case. Most of that was an orchard. But what we think we need to do internally is to look at, do some more thinking about it, quick thinking, and then present to you maybe the possibility of some kind of an overlay zone that would go on this piece of property that would actually, we have the plan, but would bring that plan into our planning process as an actual type of zone, whether it's a town center zone or something that gives added to the process. And so we think that'll take us a couple of months to work through that. Maybe I'm being generous there, but we want to work through that and be able to propose that to you. At the same time, is work parallel with that to get the entitlements. What do we need to do to get the entitlements? Meaning the zone, put the zoning in place. And then the hope is to package that, and we're working with UDOT all through that process, and then to package that, and then UDOT would actually buy off on that and then get it out on the market. And we're not quite sure whether they'll use their, I think that speaks that they'll use their traditional processes, which is by auction. We'll see if that holds or whether it doesn't, but the hope is that there'll be a thoughtful review, but when it goes out, it'll go out as one piece, and it'll go out with all of these entitlements in place that says this has been zoned for this, so there's nobody can say we didn't know what we were buying. Now, a developer may come in after the fact, you know, that's just what they do, and that's okay. They may say, hey, you've got this kind of zoning here, and can we switch it? Can we move this one 300 feet this way and move the other one 300 feet that way? Whatever, right? You have, depending on who buys it, they may have certain relationships with certain grocers, for example, that some like to do it, be positioned this way, and some want to be positioned this way. And so they'll have to come back to the city at that point in time and say, hey, we want to tweak this, but we don't think there'll be any, unless we would consent it, which I don't think we would do. We'll be collectively given your mindset to this point is we're not talking about significant changes, right? We're talking about making tweaks around. Somebody says, we're bringing in XYZ company. They won't fit on this pad. Can we extend it by a half acre? And you have the ability to say, yeah, we will, or no, we won't. So those things will probably happen. Those are the next steps, is get that in place and packaged, and then get it out on the market. And there's quite a bit of informal interest. There's some local developers that we talked about some of those that have relationships with tenants. One, a grocer we talked about, that is really, really anxious, calls on a regular basis to see what the status is. And we suspect there'll be others as well.
But that master plan for this area, is that part of the development agreement as well? That goes with the, you mentioned this agreement, if it's passed tonight, but also the development agreement. Or maybe this is part of the development agreement. It gets in, it's.
We could, yeah. The reference in the language with the contract with the state talks about, I think one of the ones highlights is it needs to be consistent with
The planning.
The
But
planning.
I'm saying, when you said that UDOT's going to go out and sell this with that development agreement, like, this is what you have to do.
Yeah, these are conditions, you have to follow this,
Right.
these
Yeah.
entitlements have been put in place in this agreement. So that's
I
this
think
is
they're
really not,
calling it a development agreement.
Yeah, that's what we
but-
call it, but that's
Yeah.
the,
Yeah.
yeah,
it goes with it. It's like, yeah, you want it, but here's what it looks like.
yeah. Again, that's the benefit.
For us,
That's- We think the big benefit of this
Good job.
is that we have that for such a large scale, the opportunity to do that. Once in a while, you have 2 or 3 acres. You know, we had down here south of us, we're close to this kind of an opportunity down here south of Gentile, and then at the last minute it came apart of our own doing, of the city's doing, but unfortunately, but you know, this is compared to that scale is 4 times bigger, so it's really an opportunity of hopefully what can be, with you guys' guidance, and Mayor and I were talking. This is not going to evolve in a year. It's going to take some time, but it can be a remarkable thing for the area.
Yeah. You gotta get started.
That'll be an importance of the overlay zone. We'll have to be pretty careful and make sure it's well defined, so we
Yeah.
know the outcome.
Yeah,
Right.
I think that's a big key here, yeah. Especially where we don't control the property. Okay, any other questions? No, I'm going to go ahead and move on. We have, well, it is a public hearing in the next meeting, so you're welcome to ask the questions again.
No, just one other question.
Sure.
Back to the town center overlay you're talking about. Will it be specific for that, or is it going to be a zone that can be used in the other town centers, more general?
It may be one.
Like,
or the
we've got
other.
one out west.
It may be one, or it
I
might
think that's west.
might be both. We don't know yet.
That way.
That way's west.
Where that way.
It's okay. We know which
But
way.
you anticipate having an overlay for each town center?
Not
Well,
all
I
of
would
them.
think so, but
Well, the others aren't,
If you
wouldn't be a
recall-
TRZ though.
No, I'm not talking about TRC. I was talking about,
No.
you mentioned that you needed to create a.
If you recall the economic development plan, actually the Highway 89 Gordon and then the West Layton Town Center were actually separate than the others that were identified in the general plan
Yes.
in that process. So we may just limit it to that. I don't know.
Okay, that was the question.
I think as we start through that in more earnest and talk about it internally, staff, and try to figure it out, and then certainly when we have discussions with you guys about it, I think it'll hopefully become clear that this is either unique or it's not. And if it's unique, then it needs to maybe have its own unique approach, because there's some things that we think are really important, critical here to our success that may not apply out west. Or we may find just the opposite, that the ideas here also translate here, and then that would be easier. But I think we're very open to try to make sure that this opportunity is maximized, if you will, and because it's such a key piece. So that's not a good answer, but that's,
No, that was-
as we've talked about it just generally, we hope the answer will come to us as we start working through that process and get the feedback.
To Bettina's point, we want to go.
We just want to know.
Like,
We don't have to push through, we just like to know.
Yeah,
Be able to have
let's go.
good answers for people.
Thank you.
Okay, good? Last call. Okay, we're moving on. Let's go ahead and go on to item number 4, which is a discussion of My Hometown Initiative. And this is, if you recall at the last meeting when we did our quick report, I had mentioned that Clint and I had attended this meeting. And I felt like it was important enough that we wanted to have a discussion amongst ourselves, really see if it's something that we want to embrace or not, and kind of just have an open discussion, because typically we don't have a lot of time to discuss items. And this, to me, is kind of very interesting. I like the concept behind it. I know Lon's going to represent Morgan in this case, because Morgan was there. No?
I'm not representing anybody.
You're familiar with it? or-
Yeah, we have the.
or-
Playing the role of Morgan.
Yeah, are you, yeah, I was gonna say, I didn't know if he was gonna present anything on it based upon his notes, but if not, then, I think Clint and I can pretty much, fill you guys in on and let you know what it's about. I'll go ahead and kind of start and Clint add in as much as possible, because it was it was a great meeting. It was one that was, has to do more with, housing and improvements and, blighted areas, but it's a program that's designed to really allow our citizens to take ownership and contribute and to kind of help pay it forward. But in order to really get it off the ground and that, it needs city support as well as the folks behind this, which it's, I'll be clear here, it's not a specific one faith, but it's more or less interfaith based that will end up driving it, although the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is the one that kind of spearheaded it. They started down in West Jordan with the project with this, and it took hold, and the citizens really embraced it and kind of put it to good use, and then Ogden City's been doing it now. And it's one of those things where, take for instance, I don't know, let's just say west of the, or east of the high school here, we've got some homes over there that, are they're some of our older homes perhaps, and yet maybe some of them need some painting done on them, or the yard work done, or cleanup areas, right? So you form a group that comes together, and actually, let me back up. You pretty much set this up much like how we have our emergency, our CERT program, right? Where you have block captains or designated areas. So you have an ownership area of say like a block captain with some other folks in there that say, hey, in our area, you know what, so-and-so's home needs some help. We know that they don't have the right income to be able to do those improvements, or they're maybe physically handicapped, can't do it. Let's get a group together and go in and help do that. And so from there, you kind of build, like I said, these communities or these areas, but you work it as a whole by support by the city, because it might be a situation where, I don't know, I'm going to take maybe let's take Highway 193. We know that that's an issue up there with it's always, there's a lot of trash all the way along there, but yet that is something that nobody really wants to take ownership of. But maybe those citizens that live right close by there, they see it every day and they don't like that, so they can kind of say, hey, this is something that we feel needs to be taken care of, or we need to put a group together to do that. But there's so much trash there. We're going to need some trailers and that to go through and pick this up and put it in these trailers and then take it to the landfill. So it's kind of like our day of service that we've been doing, for the past 4 years now. But it's something you do year round. And it's spread throughout the entire community, and it's really reaching the residents. But like I said, in order to get it off the ground, it really kind of requires support from us and maybe our staff officials and that. And that's where I think it's good. Lon, did you speak to Ogden then on theirs?
Morgan, I can,
Oh, Morgan did. Oh, okay.
I can share with you what Ogden's lease commitment is. We weren't able to get the information back from West Valley in terms of the scale. This was represented to Morgan from the volunteer manager at Ogden City.
Okay.
It was okay to share it, but these are some of the details regarding the resources and costs that the city puts in. I'll just read these bullet points if that's okay. It says the city currently holds 4 days of service events a year. Projects have consisted largely of cleaning up, repairing single-family residences. And I assume the city provides these, but they have needed at least 15 dumpsters. They've got 15 dumpsters on each day of service. The city provides free landfill passes for those dumpsters. Requires 3 backhoes and 3 city employees were committed, that day. 3 dump trucks and 3 city employees obviously to operate them. Says city meetings with my hometown staff are required every 2 weeks. So that'd be city staff that would be meeting with my hometown staff. I'm not sure who that is, but every 2 weeks. The city must provide representatives at the meetings from most departments, including legal, code enforcement, police, fire, and community development. I don't know if that's a requirement of the program or whether that's just what the city said internally. The city must provide workers' comp insurance to cover volunteer accidents. Some past injuries have included broken limbs. I assume they're talking on people, not trees.
Yeah.
Each day of service draws about 1,500 volunteers, and the city must provide a free lunch to the volunteers. And then the other costs include safety vests for volunteers. And then they also reference that Ogden currently has 2 community resource centers. I don't know if that's, that the city's required to provide something like that, or whether that's just there. Or
We asked that question. That's the long-term goal of the program.
And then this references, that detail is that one of the faith institutions you talked about does help reimburse some of the costs the city incurs. Those are the highlights of what was sent to them. So it is a commitment, obviously part of the city in terms of staff, equipment, resources. And,
Well, I would assume money too, resources, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, because you can't paint a house just on volunteers.
yeah.
You gotta,
Yeah, so-
somebody's gotta buy the paint.
Yeah.
So you mentioned you don't know who on the other side, who they meet with, the church will call missionaries
Yeah.
to head up the other side. And then they work to get volunteers or other people to come and work interfaith
Yeah.
to have the labor provided for these days of service, but also to help oversee, be a mission for somebody.
Yeah.
So I know that as far as when I talked about the resource center, when I said that that's kind of like their long-term goal, is I think they're looking at it from the point of view of, helping people primarily with housing and pride of ownership, quite honestly. And the resource center over time becomes kind of like that place where people can come and kind of ask for help, number one, but also that resource center is also a place where there's other entities that can help, so it doesn't fall upon the city, right? So that somebody needs, I don't know, maybe they're a VA, but then they can qualify for some funds, but yet they don't know exactly how to go about getting those funds to help out, right? They can do that, or there might be other grants available. So also, what they explained is it actually has grown and it's becoming more of, and I'm going to use the analogy of like the health department, they wanted to build this building down here and it became a resource center for a lot of other entities, services, I should say, not entities, but services to help people. Maybe somebody needs help understanding, Social Security benefits or, food banks, whatever it is, that it becomes kind of like that type of a resource center. And the way that Ogden got their resource centers is they actually had, I think the LDS Church had a facility that was available. And so they bumped it up to the authorities to say, okay, do we have the commitment here? Do we want to turn this into a resource center? And that's how they did that. So that's where that resource stemmed from. And I think the long-term commitment really is kind of providing just that opportunity for folks to be engaged with their city and know that there's opportunities to help one another. When I talk about interfaith, I can tell you, and I've been on the project and helped them, was his name, Pastor Jimmy. He's one up on 193, or I mean 89 at the, just going into South Ogden there, that church, Mountain
View Baptist.
Mountain View Baptist. So they actually have a pretty good army already of folks that have done this, but they identify areas all over, but they've helped a lot of projects in Ogden. So I really think you kind of have a built-in base there with them, as well as I know our interfaith group is looking to kind of expand their purview on some of the projects they want to do or services. So myself, I see this as an opportunity to really, bond our citizens and help, show that pride of ownership. And I know, Alex, you was concerned about some of the trashy areas, or how you can see how, especially since we passed our zero-scape, and how folks let the weeds come out. Guess what? This is a great time to kind of say, hey, you know what? Let's kind of go in and help those folks and kind of help that play a forward type mentality to kind of, okay, we cleaned up this yard, now let's have those guys go help us clean up another yard type thing. So anyway, that's really the gist of the program, but it does, I think in order to get it off the ground, it really requires the commitment on the city, and that's why I felt like this is something that as a council we need to discuss. And certainly we can have a meeting, if you guys are interested in this, then we can actually have that committee come in that Clint and I met with, and they'd be happy to present to us and kind of explain the program more in depth than what I'm doing. I'm not sure I'm doing this justice. Clint, what about you? I mean, I feel like I've done all the talking.
I think that Ogden was, we met with the couple that's in, well, the guy that's in charge of Ogden, and he's told us Ogden's different than Layton. And he admitted that. And they've got a lot of things going on in the community, and I mentioned that the day of service type activities are probably any city could benefit from that. In Ogden, they have a community resource center, and they're teaching English as a second language, and they're teaching Spanish as a second language, and they're teaching sewing classes, and they're teaching all of these community-based type that I'm not sure that we're not Ogden.
Yeah.
But maybe there's something here that we could do to help. One of the things that they mentioned was code enforcement in
Yes.
Ogden. The savings of code enforcement, of having people just take care of it, has been great. And they threw out some numbers. I don't know what the numbers were, but they were like, wow, that was a lot of money. That's important. I think it's important to us to have to your point, you mentioned that in the past of certain areas of the city, but this might just be a home by home, or not necessarily total neighborhoods, because I don't think we have that here. But again, a resource. And yeah, there's probably but a resource, and then we decide if we want to do this or not. But it seemed like something that could be helpful.
Well, and to take it a step further, when we're talking citizens here, but realistically, you really get the buy-in or the support of businesses in your area as well. Case in point, like you mentioned, like I said, paint, who's going to pay for that? Well, you know what, we've got a couple of paint shops. We've got Sherman Williams here, we've got Home Depot. Those folks like to do those projects, and they actually have, I know Home Depot has a group of employees that they actually will say, okay, this project's going on, we want you, who wants to volunteer and go help? And they actually acknowledge their employees and send them out to help. So I really think that it's a matter of getting it off the ground, but I think it would be self-sustaining as time goes on. But more importantly than that, I personally see this as an opportunity to really kind of bring in some of our other sources that we've been trying to do. Case in point, the communities that care, right? I mean, this resource center is basically there's no use to recreate it if we have our community that cares, but really kind of get that, have that home base, right? And be able to bring folks there and kind of learn from those programs as well. So, I don't know, I think you could bring in a lot of other entities into it and kind of make it a pretty viable program in the long run.
So I've just been kind of looking at the website while you all were talking, and there are Ogden, Orem, Provo, Salt Lake, West Valley cities that have this program going, it looks like. My thing is still trying to understand what it all is about, because on the homepage they talk about revitalizing, homes, that need some extra attention, TLC. I think about our Habitat for Humanity, participation and how we help with things like that. But then it's the community resource centers piece that I'm still trying to understand the connect, because they're talking about revitalizing neighborhoods, but then they have this CRC piece, right? And their weekly classes to Clint's point, ESL, computer literacy, mental health, children's literacy, art, financial management, fitness and sports, piano, all kinds of things that are more, it's more of like a community center. It is a community resource center, but just understanding how those pieces connect, I think it would be really beneficial to have a presentation maybe from the folks who run this, and not necessarily just Ogden either. To Clint's point, we're not Ogden, but we do have other programs that meet all of these happening in the city already. Some that we participate in, some that we don't, but just understanding, one, is this something that we think we want to do? And then two, do we pull together, how do we pull together the things that we're already doing to kind of help fit? I will say with Communities That Care, our biggest struggle has been getting into the schools, just because of all of the red tape and political stuff and all of the things that are happening there, but that's where the kids are that need the help. And so if there were a community center, a resource center that was already in the city, we wouldn't necessarily have to rely on, schools, after school programs and things like that, because we could funnel them to a center such as this that was community run, as opposed to trying to get through red tape at the school district. So I mean, I can see benefits, but I can also see questions that bubble up. So that would be my thing, would just be if we could talk to the folks who even started this to begin with, and then understand how the housing and the neighborhood piece fits with the community resource offerings, because those are kind of the disconnect for me.
And they had mentioned that it could just start with a couple days of service too. It doesn't, it's just how you start and where you start. One other thing we didn't mention was these cities have to be approved by the church. And so you just don't go to them and say, hey, we want to.
Which church?
From the LDS church, of saying, yeah, we'd be willing to invest some money, as you mentioned, in the area, and Layton has been approved to
be one of their
to be one of the next areas. And so the question I asked was, what if we, thanks, but we got it, and what do you do? And they said, we'll go off to another community. So it's...
We got it as in we got the money, or we got it as in we don't want to do the program?
Either or.
Whichever.
Okay.
Whichever.
Yeah.
But that's why they contacted us, because they're like, hey, you've been approved now. We can talk to you. So
Yeah.
that was the reason for the call.
I like the idea that I don't think anybody at the table doesn't, where you help somebody that actually needs help. I'm not, I get a little worried, I hate that word, but anyway, concerned maybe that, there's a lot of people that just don't care. My house looks like this, I don't care. No matter, even if you said, we'll paint it, we'll get out of here.
Yeah.
And I understand that, but I just want to make sure that if we're going to help, let's really help. Let's don't
Well, that's where I
You
think
know.
the organization of having your, whether you want to call it your zones or your block captains, I mean, if we want to imitate what CERT already is, and actually we could utilize maybe the CERT people as well to kind of help
Yeah.
spearhead our areas if that's what we want, because they're the ones that know their area the best and know the individuals and know their circumstances to say, okay, this place warrants it, no, even though this looks bad, no, that one doesn't. One of the programs that they did for a gentleman, he was an immigrant, and his house needed some work, and he was very inclusive and didn't really get out in the community and wanted to share much, right? But the folks in that area knew of the circumstances, so they went to him and said, hey, we'd like to, paint the exterior of your house, da-da-da-da, and he was like, what, how much, and they were saying, no, this is a service, so he kind of they went in and did that, and then he realized how welcoming it made him feel and rewarded, that he then said, well, how can I help? And so he jumped in and helped on the next project. And apparently now today, and this is over in August, apparently now he's kind of one of the main project leaders, throughout the city. I mean, he really embraced it and kind of felt, could gain the value behind it, which I think that's really what it's about. It's really, people caring for people.
Well, I'm all in as long as we take one step at a time,
Right.
okay?
And that's why I felt
And-
like this discussion
And
was
like you
warranted
said, to
before we
have
do
them,
anything.
somebody come and actually say, here's who we are, here's why we are who we are, and these are the steps, I mean, when you come in and say, oh, we need a center here, when actually all we need to do is begin. Let's have a day where we have a day of service, which we have, so maybe we have two, and then kind of work our way, where we always feel like when we're done, we've accomplished something good,
Mhm.
not just given something away.
Right.
And so,
I'd love to see a presentation and say, what are your goals? What are the goals for the overall, and what are we already meeting through programs that we already
yeah.
implement? So,
Okay.
lots of discussion.
Just don't give them 90 minutes.
No,
Yeah.
I was gonna say,
No
this is
kidding.
one of the, they will rattle on and on and on and on. Tell you too much of one topic.
They're
Okay.
passionate. sounds
Well,
like.
Yeah,
yeah,
they are,
yes,
but-
they are,
So y'all of you
We've
agree
had a
then we
number of
should
those before.
schedule a time and have them present? Okay. All right.
Yeah, council member.
That work for you?
Yeah, we can have a future city work meeting, we can invite them to come in.
Yeah.
That would work. We'll get the contact information along, Morgan may have it.
Yeah, I know
Future
Morgan
meeting,
has
we
it.
can- We can do that. Facilitate
Steve
that.
Peterson is
Yeah, there's definitely,
you know
he's
him.
kind of
Steve.
pushing it.
Yeah, with Pearson Manufacturing. Oh, okay.
He has Layton.
Yeah.
Oh, good. That's good.
Yes.
Gary might, yeah.
Yeah, I think this might be his program.
good.
so,
It's good to know somebody's got us.
yeah. Okay, well, that concludes that discussion then. We have one more item on the agenda, which is a closed door session. You got enough, we good for that? You want to do that?
Yeah, I think,
Okay. All right, well then, I'd say let's move on to item number 5. So in doing so, I'll need a motion to go into a closed door session, and anyone who's not involved with that, I'm going to ask you to please
I'd like to, hang on, Kim, are you good? Okay, thank you. All right, I'd like to welcome everyone out to our city council meeting for the brand new year of 2025. Today's January 2nd, and our start time is 7:06. And once again, I appreciate the patience for us here on getting started tonight. We have a very short agenda, but at the same time, we do like to follow our customs that we have established here as a governing body. And so we like to start every meeting with a prayer and a pledge, and we have each council member take a turn for the month. And tonight it is Councilmember Bloxham's time, so I'm going to turn it over to him.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm going to lead us in a word of prayer, and then we'll stand and repeat the pledge. Our Father in heaven, we're grateful for our many blessings and the chance to have a new year, and we're grateful to be met together and discuss the affairs of the city, and we ask the Holy Spirit to be with us to help us to entertain good dialogue and try to make the best decisions for those with whom we represent. We're grateful for all of the workers in the city and all those people who help city services move forward. We're grateful for the freedoms we enjoy, and we ask you to please bless our nation and our city and our state. And we say this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, if you want to stand and repeat the pledge with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you very much, Councilman Bloxham. Council, I'm going to move on now to our municipal events, being that we have no minutes to take care of. So if anybody has anything they'd like to share at this time, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mayor. Our Recreation Department has put together a fun event, a new event in the city to my knowledge, a jigsaw puzzle tournament. A week from tomorrow night, it'll be held at Legacy Junior High Gymnasium. You can put together a group of 4 of your favorite jigsaw puzzle enthusiasts, and you will have 2 hours to put together a 500-piece puzzle. And the prizes for the winners, you can go to laytoncity.org in the Parks and Recreation Department under registrations to sign up, $20 per team.
That's good. That's a fun one, especially this time of year. Good. Okay. Anyone else? Is there any other announcements? If not, I'll go ahead and proceed. I know it's, everybody's enjoyed the holidays and been able to hopefully spend good time with their family and friends. And so that's what the new year's about, is a new start. So at this time, I'm going to go ahead and go on down to item number 6, which is our public hearing. So with that, oh, excuse me. Good, thank you for the catch. I need to start off.
I apologize. I was looking for my announcement for CTC. May I make that?
Sure. Let's go back to it.
So on Thursday, January 9th, there will be a Everyday Strong class called Let's Build Resilience Through Relationships. It's a new approach to anxiety and depression, and our Communities That Care is a program for families. It is to help with child prevention of drug use, substance abuse, alcohol, and suicide. And so we have this Everyday Strong class that's being offered on Thursday, January 9th from 5 to 6:30. It'll be at the Weber State Davis campus, right here off of 193, 2750 North University Park Boulevard. And you can go to the dbhutah.org website to sign up. It is free for all attendees. And I wanted to make that announcement, so apologize
No,
for
I'm
being
glad
late,
you
but
looked that
thank
up,
you.
because that's a good one. And certainly we want our Communities That Care program to be well received and know that truly this governing body is concerned about our residents and want to offer anything we can for them. So thank you. Okay. I am now going to actually open it up for our citizens' comments. So anyone who is here and would like to make a comment to this governing body, that you're welcome to, unless it's pertaining to the public hearing. that's pertaining to our public hearing, then it will allow you time at that to go ahead and speak on that particular topic. But in the meantime, it's wide open, and all I ask is that you state your name and what city you're from, and please understand that this body will listen, but they will not respond, but certainly we will take all the information and make sure we get back to you regarding your concerns or suggestions. So with that, I'll turn the time over to you.
Do you still need address?
No.
Just city?
Yeah.
Sean Schuler, I live in Layton. I want to start, I don't know how many of you were on council when it got passed, and I hate that the events that had to happen for it to happen, but I just want to express absolute appreciation for the change in the fireworks policy. I live in East Layton. I live by Andy Adams Park. And until this year, I know it's New Year's, so it's a little bit less than normal. Several of my neighbors are really, really hopeful for this next summer that we don't live in Iraq or Afghanistan again, because every year it has ruined. When I was a kid, I loved fireworks like everyone. My adult life living in Layton, last 10 years or so, it's just terrible. It's too much. It was a designated fireworks zone, and I get the reasons for it and all of that. It just was out of control. Those events like happened this past summer with the professional, non-professional fireworks displays, it would just go, it just never ended. So we were pleasantly surprised to see that policy changed. It was pretty quiet this year. It seemed like most people abided by it for New Year's, and I get everybody is wanting to go do it, but it was so much less this next year. Please, I hate being that guy. I hate feeling like that old fart I grew up with when I was a kid that was just always get off my lawn and all that. I really do hope there's some enforcement because it just has been too much, and we're really, really hopeful that this is way better. So I appreciate that it was taken seriously. Again, I hate that it had to kind of get the push that it did, but I'm glad that it's going the direction it is. You may not hear that from others, but I'll say it, so thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate that. Okay, next.
Michael Christensen, Layton, Utah. I had a chance to watch the working meeting from 2 weeks ago where Ivory Homes came in and talked about their affordable housing plan. And I was excited to hear them come in and see what they were talking about. I appreciated Councilor Smith-Edmondson's note that $400,000 homes aren't starter homes. Okay, but I was shocked and kind of concerned that they didn't address the real elephant in the room. All the products and projects they're talking about putting 18 to 2,200 square foot houses on 10,000 R110 PRUD lots and building amenities and organic farms and other things around it. And that misses the point. The problem with housing costs in Utah is the cost of the soil. It's the cost of the dirt. We're not going to solve the housing problem in Layton by putting 2,200 square foot homes on 10 and 12,000 foot lots. The problem is that doesn't work. Now, I'm all for not wanting to have townhomes and minimizing the number of apartment buildings and things, but we've got to get to the point where we're building 2,200 square foot lot homes on 6,000 square foot lots or 5,000 square foot lots, because it's the soil lack, it's the dirt that we're running out of that is the problem, and we're not going to solve this any other way. We've got to find a way to make acceptable housing on smaller parcels with smaller setbacks, move the houses closer to the front so the backyards can be bigger for the kids to go play. We've got to start doing things like that. We've got to be able to make larger homes happen on smaller parcels, or we're never going to get there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, is there anyone else? Okay, are you able to come up to the mic? No, we do not have a portable, but this definitely begs an idea and surfaces the opportunity. So I think perhaps that's our New Year goal. As a council, we'll go ahead and make that available.
I've been here for 13 years now. It's the first time I've ever come to a city council meeting. I'm glad to see a member of the bar here. I'm a dropout member of the bar. But
Do you mind stating your name?
my name is Matthew Hilton, Hilton. I live on Fieldstone Way in Layton. I wanted to make a brief presentation and read in the form of a question, and that is, I had the chance to participate in some misdemeanor cases a year ago. And sometimes you have misdemeanor representation done when you've got a gracious prosecutor who's not going to go for the jugular. We have other times where, at least in what I was finding, that there was no escape route involved for someone who simply made a mistake. And what I wanted to address tonight is there's a need to clarify when we have court-appointed counsel, what is the nature of the counsel? Number two, if you're not representing the individual, what does it mean to have standby counsel? Standby counsel is where you're educating the defendant as he goes along, or she goes along. And there's a question as to whether or not you're actually representing that person or not. However, in the case I was involved in, there was a contractual demand in the city's contracts with appointed counsel that said you cannot use this contract for prosecutorial misconduct. And so what that puts a defendant facing is, if they're going to accept counsel, they've got to understand that if there's a malfeasance on the part of the prosecutor, they will have no representation, whether or not they're involved as a individual who is simply being assisted with the finances to do the case, or they're being assisted by this representation that you're simply going to be standby counsel and provide assistance when they have a hard problem. In conclusion, I just wanted to suggest.
Sorry, we typically give a 3-minute, a 3-minute opportunity for folks to speak, but go ahead and make your conclusion statement for us, and then.
The conclusion is that none of this conflict of interest was disclosed when the trials began or when the counsel was appointed. And in one case, the counsel even helped him write curative jury instructions, or did good things for him. But when it got down to this conflict of interest, they wouldn't take any action, and they wouldn't explain why they wouldn't take any action. So I was wondering, I don't want to dump on Mr. Block, but if there could be an interim committee appointed to help look up the city ordinances, actual contracts, and possibly even do a survey of contracts for cities in Davis County and find out what is going on. When I saw how much money they were getting paid, I was aghast that you could even hire attorneys for the amount of money we were paying them.
Okay.
So I just wanted to offer that as a suggestion.
Well, thank you. We appreciate that.
That for you.
Did I scare you? Goodness, I did not expect that.
Turn around.
Okay, is there anyone else in the audience that wishes to address us? If so, we do have the mic on the other side if you want to. Okay, seeing that there's no other comments on our citizens' comment portion, then I'm going to go ahead and move down to item number 6, which is our public hearing portion of our meeting. And what we'll do here is we'll have Mr. Longcrow present the information to us, and then I'll ask the council to open it up for public comments.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Tonight we have before you Resolution 2501, which is an interlocal participation agreement with UDOT and the city to create a transportation reinvestment zone at the intersection of approximately the intersection of Highway 89 and Gordon Avenue. I'm going to give a little background on the processes that have taken place up to this point, so you understand those before I move into items in the agreement. So in 2018, the state legislature passed Senate Bill 136, which provided the opportunity to create a transportation reinvestment zone. At that time, it was not defined, and so there were further actions in the following years. In 2019, the legislature passed, well, they amended 11-13-227, which outlined the process for a public agency to work with a state agency and create a TRZ. In 2023, the rules were created from the state, which provided guidelines and outlined to the Department of Transportation how they are able to participate in a TRZ with a public agency such as Layton City. As far as conversations that have taken place over the years, city staff began conversations with UDOT in 2020 regarding some specific land that was purchased for the widening project of Highway 89, and that is located at the intersection of Gordon Avenue and Highway 89. In 2021, we had further discussions regarding the potential to master plan this property to ensure on our behalf a good development. At least that was our purpose and hope. In 2022, city staff applied for a grant and was awarded a grant through the Wasatch Front Regional Council to master plan the property, which resulted in the Gordon Avenue Highway 89 Town Center Master Plan adopted by this body on March 21st of this past year. The property in question is shown in orange, but the 40.5 acres specifically is shown with the hash marks through it. This process was lengthy. There was a lengthy public process. I know there were a lot of conversations on the side also with the public and the neighbors to this property over the year and 1 month process. There was the Planning Commission recommended approval. The City Council adopted the plan again in March of this past year, which resulted in this plan, which was again adopted. This plan outlines certain land uses and densities specific to this property. After the highway was completed, the reconstruction project was completed in June of 2023. There were further conversations, and in this past fall of 2024, UDOT indicated they were ready to begin conversations regarding a TRZ, which had been previously discussed. Staff drafted an agreement, which was passed to UDOT and the Attorney General's office, and after some negotiation in December 10th of this past year, a final draft agreement was negotiated between these entities. And on December 13th, this was presented to the Utah Transportation Commission Board, who approved and authorized UDOT staff to move forward with this interlocal agreement with Layton City and to implement the agreement and the TRZ. This is part of the process, and just like this public hearing, this is also part of the process to create a TRZ. So the highlights in the agreement I've written here, and then there's a couple of more, or at least one more that we discussed in the work meeting that I'll bring up. But this agreement allows for the collection of tax increment for property tax and sales tax for the purpose of funding certain transportation projects. The money that is collected is deposited into a TRZ fund according to the agreement, and this fund is managed by a TRZ board, which is created per statute, and also the regulations and management of that board is determined by the board itself. All proposed projects that will be brought through the board, who will approve the projects and the funding, may be reimbursed by the TRZ fund after the fact. So there's two options. The city can either wait for the tax increment to accumulate, which it could in reality take at least 15 years for the two projects we've identified, or the city may fund the projects and they can be reimbursed through the TRZ over time. The one item that we discussed in the work session is each of these projects will be approved, may be approved through a separate agreement that will be brought by the entity that's proposing the project to the board. And the great part about this agreement is UDOT has agreed to the Section 3B, which requires all proposed projects to comply with adopted planning documents, and this includes the master plan that was approved. The TRZ board is comprised of 3 members according to the current state statute. One representative is from UDOT Region 1, one representative is from Layton City, and one representative has a general knowledge of finance and audit procedures, and that will be determined by the 2 other entities. Each board member will have 1 vote. And UDOT and the city may have a legal representative to provide legal advice. City staff, as mentioned here, will provide staff support to the TRZ board. The area in orange is the TRZ plan area, and this agreement will apply to that entire area. It's about a little over 50 acres. And that's the end of the presentation. City staff recommends that the council consider approving 2501 as submitted. I am open to any questions.
Okay, council, do you have any additional questions? I know we discussed it at length in our work meeting, but this is the public hearing, and before we open it up for the public, if you have any additional questions, you're welcome to ask at this time.
Can you go back one slide to the picture, the image? I must have missed it in the other. What's the distinction between the hashed area and the non-hashed area?
The 40.5 acres is specific to the town center master plan that was adopted. The other land is not included in that master plan, but all of the land in orange is currently owned by UDOT.
So it has potential to have implication, or we could imply tax money to transportation projects outside of the town center area.
Correct.
That's why the other area.
Correct. For instance, UDOT has indicated a potential need for a light on the east side of Gordon Avenue, on the east side of Highway 89, and that it could be used for that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Go ahead.
For the purpose of the public meeting, we had a lot of discussion in the work meeting about the tax revenues and the property, or the sales tax and property tax revenues, and how they're not uber significant. But could you explain to the public the reason or the difference between why we would be interested in something like this, even though the tax revenues are not necessarily that great?
Really, the biggest benefit for this agreement is the acknowledgement by UDOT to follow the master plan that was approved. The funding can help with 2 transportation projects we've identified. This allows us to use sales tax and property tax to specifically help fund those transportation projects. And this was created to actually help UDOT enhance their system or their new facilities. As was mentioned in the work meeting, they spent a lot of money on this highway project, this interchange as well, and they hope to ensure that there's not a development that would make this intersection fail right off the bat. And so there's those two reasons that it's a good idea to participate with UDOT in this agreement.
I just wanted to add, and you know, I know the rest of the council, we've spoke on this over time as well as tonight, but the opportunity to be able to have a large input in what happens in this area from the standpoint of the city, I think far outweighs, you know, the participation we have to take with regard to the tax revenues, because it just allows the voice of the residents that we've already received and accepted through all of the processes with that Gordon Town Center to be upheld. And so I just, you know, kudos to staff and you all for what you've done to try and help make sure that the vision for the city that the residents as well as the council has is something that we can make good on. So thank you for your work.
Go ahead.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Just, I guess, as a point of information for anyone, I know this has been a situation that's had a lot of discussion. We had a lot of public hearing here before when we had the master plan discussed. You know, and typically we have a parcel property owned by UDOT. They sell it at an auction, and then some developer buys it, and then they can do whatever they want with it so long as it's within the zoning, and they come and ask us for a rezone or whatever they want to do. But this, in those situations, though, we get 100% of the tax revenue. This TRZ, we're splitting that 50% to us, 50% to UDOT. And so one of the questions that we discussed in the work meeting was, why would that be a good thing for the city, considering that, you know, we now have, we're losing out on 50% of the tax revenue going to an outside agency, even if it is a state agency. And the concept behind this TRZ, and you can just maybe reemphasize this, Lon, is that the funds that UDOT would collect as part of the tax, their 50%, must be spent in this 40.5 acre area, correct?
Correct, or the 51 acre.
So it's not as if they're going to take tax increment or tax funding from sales tax and property tax generated in this area and then go put it in Sandy. It has to stay right here. And I think that's an important thing for the residents to know, that we treat and value. We want to make sure that any tax revenue that's coming into the city stays in the city. And so this, even under this situation with the TRZ, it's the first one of its kind in the state. The tax revenue generated in this, even if it's under a different organization than it usually is, will still stay within the city. So thanks, Lon.
Very good. Okay, anything else?
Just one question, Madam Mayor, thank you. We talked in the work meeting about Layton City being in charge of the projects in the area and then being reimbursed. We come up with funding, do the project, we're reimbursed. You just mentioned that UDOT wanted to maybe put a light east of 89. That would be their prerogative. That would be one of their projects. Would they also do it and then be reimbursed, or are they going to use us as that to go through our procedure and our operations to do that?
If it's a project recommended by them, actually they would have to fund the project, and it would go through their procedures to provide the funding either up front or request that tax increment in the future. And the funding would have to be in place, and that's something I forgot to mention. The funding by this agreement is required to be in place, and one way or the other it has to be in place before the project can be approved.
Okay, good questions. Okay, go ahead. That's the purpose of this meeting.
So this is the first one in the state. This would be the first one in the state. And you know, talking more about if these projects happen in the next 20 years, this is set to expire in 2046. If UDOT puts that light in 2042 and they're out a lot of money, is there Is there a catalyst in the statute to extend it? I know RDAs and EDAs get extended quite often. Is that an option in 2046?
Currently, it is. The statute doesn't regulate that. The term was determined by both parties based on our projected income from the tax increment, but it does allow you to create a whole new agreement in 20 years if we wish.
Okay. Good. All right, I'm going to bring it back to the council and ask you for a motion to open our public hearing and allow our citizens to have their input.
I move that we open the public hearing to discuss Resolution 25-01.
Okay, it's been moved in second. All in favor? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, the time is now yours. If anyone wishes to speak on our interlocal participation agreement with on Highway 89 and UDOT, then you're welcome to step up to the mic. Again, state your name, what city, and give us your opinion.
Is this a one-way, or can we get some dialogue, short answers, or is it just public comment?
No, you're welcome to make a public comment, and certainly we'll call upon the staff members to help us here.
Sean Schuler from Layton. First and foremost, I'm all for it. I think planning ahead and the master planning has been really good. But I do have some concerns, and I've only in the last couple of days learned about this and tried to do a little background. The packet didn't come out last week when I first saw it, so I didn't see that till today. I was working, trying to skim the sheet, cheating a little bit, but I saw references to public infrastructure. It didn't necessarily, it kept saying transportation projects, and clearly UDOT is, UDOT would say, and I know because I work for them a lot, but we do transportation projects, we're in the transportation business, but I kept seeing references to public infrastructure, and I just want to be sure that someone has thought ahead, not that developers would ever try to do anything a little out there, but that this doesn't suddenly become how they're going to fund, assuming UDOT hires a developer, someone to develop this, that now suddenly that fund's not being used to pay for curb, gutter, and sidewalk, certain things that would be part of a development anyway, but could be considered a public portion of a development, that this isn't suddenly a way of funding that instead of them having to front the money the normal way. Excuse me, that was the first kind of thing that concerned me a little bit. And I don't know if you know, I assume UDOT, has there been some discussion, would they hire a developer? Would they try to be a developer? Or is it TBD? Does it convey with the property? I assume this zone gets, voted on by council and it conveys with the land, or it overlays the land. Is it, if it changes hands, they sell it to a developer to develop, it keeps going? Is that how that works? I don't know the answer to that.
I don't know. Lon, Alex, I see you grabbed your mic. Whichever one wants to address it, go ahead.
That's a great question, and one we've actually thought about extensively in our discussions with UDOT and putting this together. So the way the agreement is structured and the commitment both from UDOT and from the city is that these funds will not be used. When the definition of public that we're using is not an improvement that's used by the public, but it's owned and installed by the government entity. And so any improvement, though it eventually may become public, that's originally the obligation of the developer as part of the construction of the site and development of the site, is on the developer.
Okay.
So if there's a light required early on, you have to bring something up to standard to meet the codes, either the state of or the city. That's the developer's responsibility when they develop the property. If 15 years down the road it needs to be reconfigured because of the demand, the developer's long gone, then it can be, this public money can be used, but in no way will this fund be used to supplant the developer responsibility.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
It does, and I appreciate that, because the light, for example, that I think it was 1650 West or whatever, I can't remember what we ended up naming that street, but in Gordon, the one on the west side, if there needs to be a light there at some point, like you say, 15 years down the road, it's a much easier sell if you have a way to pay for it than, well, we'd love a light, but we don't have we don't have money for a light. Okay. The last question I have is, there was the mention of the board, and it mentioned someone from Layton city, does that mean from the city or from the community at large, and someone designated by the council, or has that been kind of defined yet?
Yeah, I can't speak totally for the mayor and the council, but the understanding from the discussions is that likely those two of the three representatives at least will be, one would be a city employee, probably somebody in our engineering or public works department that has an understanding of infrastructure and manages that, and the same thing with UDOT. And then the third person is somebody that has experience and background in finance or auditing. Again, I would think it would probably be somebody tied with one of the entities who are familiar with the processes. So
Okay.
I don't think it would be an outside person.
Never hurts to ask.
Pardon?
Never hurts to ask.
Yeah. But-
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, is there anyone else has any questions? Okay, very good. Seeing that there's no more, I'll go ahead and bring it back to the council to close the public hearing and take action on Resolution 25-01.
Can I ask a question first?
Absolutely.
So just for clarity, and that was a very good question from Sean, and I appreciate that, but to be clear, we're in the preliminary stages of this agreement, right? So this is just saying that the bylaws and that will govern this entity, this TRZ, still needs to be written, correct? So those questions will be answered in the future. Okay, great. Right. Yeah.
Lon,
Okay,
did you have a
thank you.
comment on that?
If I may, actually, state statute and this agreement specifically do not allow this fund to be used for a private developer or private development.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. Okay, any other questions, council, before I acknowledge a motion here?
With that, Mayor, I'd make a motion that we adopt Resolution 25-1
And close the public hearing?
and close the public hearing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved in second that we adopt Resolution 25-01. I'll do a roll call vote on this, so I'll start down here with Councilmember Roberts,
Yes.
Councilmember Watson,
Yes.
Councilmember Morris,
Aye.
Councilmember Smith Edmondson,
Aye.
and Councilmember Thomas.
Aye.
Okay, there you have it. It's unanimous. That is the last item on our agenda, unless anybody has any unfinished business they'd like to address. If not, I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
So be it.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate everyone attending tonight, and I hope you can start your new year off and have some great resolutions going forward. So